I'm James from Untold Stories, and today I'm going to share with you a piece of history you've never heard before, a moment buried in silence, but unforgettable to those who witnessed it. It started with a simple command: take off your coat. Nothing more, just routine authority flexed in a military courtyard. But what happened next brought an entire base to a halt. One moment they were laughing at her, mocking her worn boots, her nameless uniform, and the next a general dropped to his knees. The silence that followed wasn't fear, it was recognition, because the scars on her back didn't just tell a story, they proved one. This isn't just a tale of identity, it's about truth, strength, and how sometimes the quietest people carry the loudest past. Stay with me. This is one story you won't forget. Take off your shirt. If you're not an imposter, prove it. The command echoed across the training field as Elena Duval stood surrounded by soldiers. They yanked her jacket, sneering. No insignia, no name tag. She probably came here to beg for food and play soldier. But as her back was exposed, 3 scars, razor sharp and aligned, appeared between her shoulders. The entire field fell silent. A lieutenant general, just stepping out, froze in place, then bowed his head and slowly knelt. "Commander Moore," he whispered. No one dared say another word. The air felt heavy, like the world had stopped spinning for a second. Elena didn't flinch. She didn't turn to face the crowd or acknowledge the general's gesture. Her ash-gray eyes stayed fixed on the horizon, sharp as ever, like she was seeing something no one else could. The soldiers around her shifted uncomfortably, their boots scuffing the dirt. The sneers were gone, replaced by wide eyes and half-open mouths. A few recruits glanced at each other, unsure what they just witnessed. Elena pulled her shirt back up, slow and deliberate, her fingers steady as she adjusted the collar. Not a word, not a sound, just the wind picking up, rustling her tousled brown hair. Before we go further, if this moment's hitting you, maybe you felt that kind of silence, that shift when the room realizes they got it wrong, please take a second, grab your phone, hit that like button, drop a comment below, and subscribe to the channel. It means the world to keep sharing stories like this. Stories that remind us what strength really looks like. Alright, let's keep going. It started earlier that morning when Elena stepped onto the training field at Fort Belhist. The place was buzzing. Hundreds of recruits running drills, shouting orders, the whole base alive with the kind of organized chaos you'd expect from a military hub. Elena didn't belong in that picture. Her uniform was wrinkled, faded like it had been stuffed in a drawer for years. No insignia, no name tag, just a plain gray-green outfit hanging loose on her frame. Her hair, wavy and a little wild from the wind, framed her face in a way that made her look younger than her 30 years, but also out of place, like she'd wandered in from some other world. A young sergeant, all buzzcut and bravado, spotted her first. He was the kind of guy who lived for the pecking order, always looking for someone to put in their place. "Hey!" he barked, striding over with a grin that wasn't friendly. "You call yourself a soldier? You look like a beggar." The words carried across the field, and a few recruits nearby snickered. One of them, a wiry kid with a fresh shave, muttered loud enough for others to hear. "Where'd this old lady come from? What kind of soldier doesn't wear a name tag?" The laughter spread like wildfire, heads turning, eyes locking onto Elena. She stood there dead center of the field, her boots planted in the dirt. No reaction, no frown, no blush, no nervous glance, just still. Her hands hung loose at her sides. But there was something about the way she held herself, shoulders back, chin level, that didn't match the beggar they were painting her as. The sergeant wasn't done. He stepped closer, his voice louder now, like he was performing for the crowd. "What, you here to scrub dishes in the kitchen, or you just lost?" More laughs. A female recruit with a tight ponytail chimed in. "Bet she's just some civilian who snuck in to play pretend." The jeers kept coming, but Elena's stillness seemed to pull at something deeper in the crowd. A young private, barely 19, with acne scars and nervous eyes, hesitated before joining in. He nudged the guy next to him, whispering, "She's not even blinking, man. You think she's, I don't know, dangerous." The other recruit, a stocky guy with a loud laugh, waved him off. Dangerous her. She's just some nobody who wandered in. Watch this." He picked up a cloud of dirt and tossed it at her feet. Not hard enough to hurt, but enough to make a point. The dirt scattered across her boots. Elena didn't look down. She just tilted her head, her eyes locking on to the stocky recruit for a split second. That look, calm, piercing, made him step back, his laugh dying in his throat. A drill instructor, a stocky man with a face like weathered leather, pushed through the growing circle of onlookers. His name tag read, Sergeant Callahan, and his eyes were narrow, suspicious. "Who let you in here without orders or identification?" he demanded, his voice cutting through the chatter. Elena didn't answer right away. She tilted her head slightly like she was sizing him up, then reached into her pocket. The crowd tensed, expecting trouble, but all she pulled out was a small folded piece of cloth. It was faded, barely legible, but the faint outline of an emblem caught the light. Callahan snatched it, held it up, then scoffed. This is nothing. You're in deep trouble, lady." Across the field, a group of officers watched from the shade of a command tent. One of them, Major Tanner, a man with a slick haircut and a voice that carried too much confidence, leaned toward his colleague. "She's got nerve. I'll give her that," he said, sipping coffee from a metal mug. "But nerve doesn't get you past protocol. She's done." His colleague, a quieter captain named Ruiz, didn't respond right away. He was watching Elena, noticing the way her fingers brushed the edge of her sleeve, like she was checking something hidden. "I don't know," Ruiz said finally. "Something's off. She's too calm." Tanner laughed loud enough to draw a few glances. "Calm? She's just frozen 'cause she knows she's caught." The recruits were eating it up, their whispers turning into open taunts. "She's probably homeless," one said. "Look at those boots falling apart." Another added. Elena's boots were scuffed, sure, but they were military issue. The kind that had seen real action, not just parades. Still, she didn't correct them, didn't say a word. Her silence seemed to make them bolder, like her stillness was a challenge. Callahan crossed his arms, his voice booming. "Now, you got 5 seconds to explain yourself or you're out of here in cuffs." That's when Elena spoke. Her voice was calm, low, like she was talking to a friend over coffee. "Area A, command protocol. 8 lines. Want me to recite it?" The question hung in the air, and for a second, the field went quiet. Callahan blinked, caught off guard. "Go ahead," he said, smirking like he was humoring her. Elena didn't hesitate. She started reciting word for word the classified protocol that governed the base's operations. Not a single pause, not a single stumble. 8 lines delivered like she was reading them off a page in her head. A lieutenant standing nearby, a lanky guy with glasses and a clipboard, froze mid-step. His name tag said Lieutenant Harper. He leaned forward, his brow furrowing. "That protocol was only updated in last month's classified memo," he said half to himself. The crowd didn't catch it at first, but Harper's face was changing, confusion, then something like fear. He looked at Elena, really looked at her and asked, "Who are you?" She didn't answer directly. Instead, she held up the cloth scrap again, the one Callahan had tossed aside. "I wrote it," she said simply, her voice still steady like it was no big deal. The emblem on the cloth was clearer now. Black Echo, a unit no one talked about, a unit that didn't exist on paper. Harper's clipboard slipped slightly in his hands, his fingers fumbling to catch it. He stepped closer, ignoring Callahan's glare, and lowered his voice. "Black Echo hasn't been active in years. If you're claiming that, you better have more than a rag to prove it." Elena didn't flinch. She reached into her sleeve, pulling out a small metal pin no bigger than a dime, and pressed it into Harper's hand. It was worn, scratched, but the faint engraving of a crescent moon and 3 lines was unmistakable. Harper's eyes widened. He'd seen that symbol once, years ago, in a classified briefing he wasn't supposed to attend. His voice dropped to a whisper. This can't be real." The mood shifted, but not enough to stop the momentum. By noon, they dragged Elena to the center of the courtyard. The sun was brutal, beating down on her as they forced her to stand there. A makeshift placard behind her with "Impersonator" scrawled in thick black marker. A female soldier, Captain Ingrid Ellis, strutted up, her uniform crisp, her blonde hair pulled back in a perfect bun. She was the kind of officer who thrived on control, her smile sharp enough to cut. "No name tag, no ID," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. "She's impersonating military personnel." Then she reached out, ripped the faded patch off Elena's chest, and held it up like a trophy. A fake. The stitching's all wrong. In the crowd, a young female recruit, Private Clara Larson, stood near the back, her arms crossed tight. She'd been quiet all morning, but now her lips pressed into a thin line. She'd grown up in a small town where people judged you for less than a wrinkled uniform. Something about Elena, maybe the way she stood, maybe the way she didn't beg, reminded Clara of her own mother, who'd faced down whispers and stares without ever breaking. Clara shifted her weight, her boots crunching in the gravel. She wanted to say something, to tell Ellis to back off, but the words wouldn't come. Not yet. Not in front of everyone. They didn't stop there. Two other officers, both young and eager to prove themselves, tore through her bag. It was an old canvas thing, patched in places, nothing fancy. Inside, they found a dented lunchbox, a roll of bandages, a small pouch of salt. No weapons, no ID, just stuff. One of them, a wiry guy with a smirk, held up the lunchbox and laughed. "What, you planning to cook for us?" The crowd roared. Another officer, a broad-shouldered man with a buzz cut, slammed his fist on a table nearby. "Add her to the expulsion list. She'll be investigated for impersonation." Elena didn't move, didn't defend herself. Her eyes flicked to the lunchbox just for a second, and her fingers twitched like she wanted to reach for it. But she didn't. The courtyard was a circus now. Recruits and officers alike were gathered, some shouting, some just watching, but all feeding off the energy. Ellis stepped closer, her voice dripping with fake pity. "If you're really a soldier, where's your proof? No papers, no tags, no nothing. You're not fooling anyone." Elena's jaw tightened just a fraction, but she didn't respond. Instead, she shifted her weight, her boots scuffing the ground slightly, and looked past Ellis like the woman wasn't even worth her attention. That only made Ellis madder. "You think you're above this?" she snapped. "Stand there and bake. Maybe the sun will loosen your tongue." As the hours dragged on, a maintenance worker, an older man with grease-stained hands, watched from the edge of the courtyard. He had been fixing a jeep nearby, his toolbox open at his feet. He didn't know Elena, didn't know her story, but he'd seen enough in his 30 years on the base to recognize someone who'd been through hell. The way she stood, straight but not stiff, reminded him of a sergeant he'd known decades ago, one who'd come back from a mission with eyes that didn't smile anymore. He muttered under his breath, "They're kicking a hornet's nest," and tightened his grip on his wrench. No one heard him, but he kept watching, his gut telling him this wasn't going to end the way the officers thought. Hours passed. The heat was relentless, and Elena's face was slick with sweat, her hair sticking to her neck. A few recruits started to look uneasy, like maybe this was going too far. But no one spoke up. Not yet. Then came the medical check. They marched her to a tent where a military doctor, an older man with graying hair and a tired face, was waiting. His name tag read Dr. Alaric Patel. He was supposed to do a routine check, make sure she wasn't carrying anything dangerous. But when he rolled up her sleeve to check her pulse, he stopped. There on her wrist was a scar. Not just any scar. A clean Z-shaped stitch, precise like it had been done by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Patel's hands froze. He leaned closer, his breath catching. "This stitching," he muttered, his voice low so only the officer next to him could hear. "Only operatives trained for post-border extractions are taught this technique." He looked up at Elena, his eyes searching her face. She didn't meet his gaze, just stared straight ahead, her expression blank. Patel turned to the senior commander standing nearby, a grizzled man named Colonel Adrian Vance. "If she's who I think she is," Patel whispered, "we've made a huge mistake." Vance's face didn't change, but his eyes narrowed. "Continue the search," he said. "No documents, no entry." In the tent, a junior medic, barely out of training, fumbled with his equipment, his hands shaking under Vance's stare. He glanced at Elena, then at the Z-shaped scar, and accidentally dropped a tray of tools. The clatter broke the silence, and a few officers outside chuckled. "Clumsy kid," one muttered. But the medic wasn't laughing. He'd heard stories about operatives who carried scars like that. Stories that ended with entire teams disappearing into the night. He looked at Elena again, and for a moment, their eyes met. Hers were steady, unyielding, and he felt a chill like he'd just seen something he wasn't supposed to. He bent down, scrambling to pick up the tools, his face flushed. Ellis overheard and jumped on it. She stepped forward, her voice loud and sharp. "If you're not hiding anything, then take off your shirt. Let's see if there's any unit tattoo on your back." The words landed like a slap. The crowd went quiet for a second, then started up again, louder. "Take it off!" a recruit shouted. Others joined in, their voices overlapping, turning into a chant. "Take it off! Take it off!" Elena's hands clenched into fists just for a moment, then relaxed. She didn't argue, didn't plead. She just stood there as Ellis grabbed her collar and yanked, forcing her to turn around. Before the shirt came down, a gust of wind swept through the courtyard, carrying the faint smell of diesel from a nearby generator. Elena's hair whipped across her face, and she raised a hand to brush it back, her fingers grazing an old, thin scar along her jawline. No one noticed it, but Private Clara Larson, still standing at the back, her breath caught. She'd seen a scar like that once on her uncle, a man who'd survived a knife fight in a war no one talked about. Clara's hands unclenched, and she took a step forward, then stopped. The crowd was too loud, too angry. She wanted to shout, to tell them to stop, but her voice felt stuck, like it was buried under years of staying quiet. The shirt came down, and there they were, 3 long parallel scars running down her spine. They weren't jagged or messy. They were clean, deliberate, like someone had carved them with a blade and meant it. The crowd stopped chanting, stopped moving, stopped breathing. The scars weren't just marks. They were a story, a brutal one etched into her skin. And then the lieutenant general walked in. His name was General Sebastian Holtz, a man with a chest full of medals and eyes that had seen too much. He'd been on his way to inspect the recruits, but when he saw those scars, he stopped dead. His face went pale, and then slowly he dropped to one knee. A senior officer, Major Lucas Klein, rushed over, his voice shaking. 3 blade scars, the oath ritual of Black Echo. The words hit the courtyard like a grenade. Black Echo. The name alone was enough to make people flinch. A unit that didn't exist in any official records. A unit that operated so far behind enemy lines, most people thought it was a myth. The entire training base froze. Alarms started ringing. Not the kind for danger, but the kind that signaled something else. Something big. Holtz looked up at Elena, his voice barely above a whisper. "We didn't know. Commander Moore, forgive us." Elena didn't respond. She pulled her shirt back up, her movements slow, precise. Her eyes met his for a second, icy, unreadable. Then she looked away. As the alarms faded, a young officer, Lieutenant Felix Chenoweth, stood frozen near the edge of the courtyard. He'd been one of the loudest earlier, mocking Elena's boots, her bag, her silence. Now his hands were shaking, his face pale. He remembered a briefing from years ago when he was just a cadet about a mission that went wrong. Operatives left behind, presumed dead. The name Black Echo had come up, whispered like a ghost story. Chenoweth's throat tightened. He wanted to apologize, to say something, but Elena wasn't looking at him. She was adjusting her sleeve, her fingers brushing that Z-shaped scar again, like it was a reminder of something she'd never forget. The officers started lining up. One by one, they bowed their heads. Not because of protocol, because they were scared, because they had just realized who they'd been mocking. Elena didn't acknowledge them. She didn't need to. Her presence was enough. But not everyone was ready to let it go. A young commander, Captain Damian Reed, stepped forward, his face red with defiance. He was the kind of guy who hated being wrong, hated losing control. "She's not even on the active roster anymore," he shouted. "She's still violating protocol." No record, no assignment. Whoever she was, she's out of line. Another instructor, a wiry woman with a permanent scowl, joined in. I don't care if she used to be elite. She can't waltz back in like a goddess. In the back, Private Clara Larson finally found her voice. She pushed through the crowd, her heart pounding, and shouted, "Enough!" Her voice cracked, but it carried. The courtyard went quiet again. Clara's hands were trembling, but she didn't back down. You don't know her. You don't know what she's done. Her eyes locked onto Reed's, and for a moment, she looked taller than she was. Elena glanced at her just for a second, and something passed between them. Not a smile, not a nod, but a flicker of recognition. Clara stepped back, her face flushed, but she'd said what she needed to. Elena's lips curved into a faint smirk. Not smug, not cruel, just knowing. I'm not here to come back, she said. Her voice so quiet it forced everyone to lean in. She reached down, pulled off her left boot, and slipped her hand inside. When she stood back up, she was holding a black chip no bigger than a quarter. She held it up and the sunlight caught it, making it glint. I'm only here to deliver this. The chip didn't look like much, but the moment Reed saw it, his face went white. He knew what it was. Everyone did. A shutdown chip. One that could kill the power to the entire base, lights, comms, defenses, everything in seconds. The loudspeakers crackled to life. Stand at attention. A voice boomed across the compound. Now present is Lieutenant Elena Moore, highest-ranking Black Echo operative, deployed 89 consecutive days behind enemy lines. The words echoed, bouncing off the barracks, the training fields, the watchtowers. Every soldier, every officer, every recruit snapped to attention. Boots hit the ground in unison. Hands saluted. Eyes locked forward. Elena didn't move. She just stood there, the chip still in her hand, her face calm as ever. Then the helicopter came. The sound started low, a distant thrum, then grew louder, the blades cutting through the air. It landed in the middle of the field, kicking up dust and gravel. The doors opened and 3 generals stepped out. Not 1, not 2, 3. Their uniforms were immaculate, their faces grim. They didn't look at the crowd. They didn't need to. They walked straight to Elena, their boots crunching in the dirt. One of them, a tall man with silver hair, held out his hand. Elena placed the chip in his palm, and he nodded just once. No words, just respect. As the generals approached, a young recruit near the front dropped his rifle. It hit the ground with a dull thud, and he scrambled to pick it up, his face red with embarrassment. He'd been one of the loudest earlier, laughing when the dirt was thrown at Elena's feet. Now his hands shook so badly he could barely grip the weapon. Elena's eyes flicked toward him just for a moment, and he froze like a kid caught stealing. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The weight of her gaze was enough to make him wish he'd never opened his mouth. The base was silent now, except for the fading chop of the helicopter blades. Elena turned, her movement smooth, unhurried. She started walking toward the edge of the field, her old bag slung over one shoulder. The crowd parted for her like water around a stone. No one spoke. No one dared. But you could see it in their faces. The shame, the awe, the realization that they had been standing in the presence of something extraordinary and had no idea. The fallout came quick. Captain Ingrid Ellis, the one who'd ripped the patch off Elena's chest, was gone by the next morning. Word was she'd been reassigned to a desk job at a remote outpost. Her career effectively over. The sergeant who'd called Elena a beggar, he was called into a closed-door meeting with General Holtz. No one knows what was said, but he came out pale, his hands shaking, and he didn't show up for drills the next day. A few recruits tried to save face online, posting snarky comments about the mystery woman on X. But those posts vanished fast. Screenshots started circulating. Instead, grainy photos of Elena's scars, whispers about Black Echo, and suddenly those recruits were persona non grata. Sponsorships dropped. Friends stopped calling. Reality caught up. Near the barracks, a group of recruits gathered that evening, their voices low. One of them, a tall kid with a buzz cut, kept glancing at the field where Elena had stood. I heard she walked through a minefield once, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Saved her whole team. Another recruit shook his head, skeptical but shaken. No way, that's just a story. But the tall kid wasn't so sure. He'd seen the way Elena moved, the way she didn't flinch, even when the whole base was against her. He pulled out his phone, started typing a comment on X, then stopped. He didn't know what to say. Not anymore. Elena didn't stick around to see it. She didn't need to. She walked away from the base, her boots kicking up dust, her hair catching the wind. The helicopter was gone now, the generals with it, but the weight of what had happened lingered. The recruits went back to their drills, the officers to their paperwork, but it wasn't the same. Every time someone glanced at the spot where Elena had stood, they remembered. They had judged her, mocked her, tried to break her, and she'd stood there unshaken, her scars telling a story they'd never understand. Years ago, in a different life, Elena had walked through fire. Not the kind you see, but the kind that leaves marks you can't hide. She'd led Black Echo through missions no one would ever talk about. Missions that didn't end in medals or parades, just silence and scars. She'd come back different, quieter, but not broken. Never broken. And now, standing in that courtyard, facing down a crowd that didn't know her, she'd carried that same strength. Not loud, not showy, just real. As she walked away, a faded photo slipped from her bag, fluttering to the ground. It was small, creased, showing a younger Elena with a team of operatives, their faces blurred by time. Private Clara Larson, who'd been trailing behind, picked it up. She stared at it, her fingers tracing the edges, then slipped it into her pocket. She didn't run after Elena, didn't call out, but she held on to that photo like it was proof of something bigger than herself. Something worth fighting for. The base would talk about her for years. Not her name, not always, but the woman with the scars. The one who didn't flinch. The one who didn't need to prove anything, because the truth was written on her skin. And as she disappeared into the distance, her bag bouncing lightly against her hip, you could almost hear the world shift a little. Like it was saying quietly to anyone who'd listen, you weren't wrong. You weren't alone. Where are you watching from? Leave a comment below and hit follow to walk with me through heartbreak, betrayal, and finally healing.